state may examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, nice loud voice. Can you give everyone your name, please?
Yes, my name is Shane Hanshaw.
And can you spell your last name for the court reporter?
Yes, it's Hanshaw.
Mr. Hanshaw, where do you work?
I work for the Ohio Attorney General's Office, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation.
And does that go by an acronym, BCI?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If you could, take a couple seconds and tell the jury, what is the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation? Where are your headquarters? What kind of work does BCI do?
We have multiple headquarters. My specific headquarters is at 1560 State Route 56. That's in London. We have my home office is there, based out of there. We have the BCI laboratory. One of them is located there. As far as my job entails, we have multiple units and multiple disciplines within the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and I'm currently assigned to the Special Investigation Unit.
And you said there's multiple units and multiple disciplines. What are some of the other disciplines?
There is the crime scene unit. There is a special victims unit. There are narcotics units, just several disciplines in those particular fields.
And you said there's a lab there at BCI as well?
Yes, there is.
And what kind of different work does the lab do?
The lab processes and examines things like trace evidence, documents, DNA evidence. Again, they have multiple disciplines within the laboratory.
And in addition to that office there in London, are there satellite offices in other areas of the state?
Yes, there are multiple throughout the state.
And those offices, do they do the same type of work, or what kind of work do those offices do as well?
Most generally, they do the same type of work. There are a few labs that specialize in other things. But as far as the offices and the investigations portion, it's relatively the same, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your background or your employment history taking you up to your current employment. So when did you start out in law enforcement?
I was basically commissioned as a peace officer in 1990 by the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office. I did complete the specified training academy for the state of Ohio to become a certified peace officer. After I completed that, I temporarily worked part-time for about 4 months, and then I was approached regarding a position as a road officer. I began as a road officer for the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office, and I progressed and was promoted to sergeant. From there, I was promoted to investigation division. And in 2005, I applied at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, actually 2004, and was hired in 2005.
Let me stop you. Let me jump in real quick on you.
Yes.
Let's back up. Let's talk about when you were at Lawrence County and you worked on the road. What were your duties on the road?
My duties as a road unit were to handle all manner of calls, burglaries, thefts, and it would entail question deaths, homicides, things of that nature.
Typical sheriff deputy, is that what you were?
Yes.
And then at some point did you move into their investigation section?
After being promoted to sergeant and working as a sergeant, then I was moved into the investigations unit.
Tell the jury, when you moved into the investigations unit there at the sheriff's office, what kind of stuff did you do there? What were your responsibilities there?
At that particular time, we were very limited on investigators, and I was basically the primary investigator. I would handle all manner of violent crimes and unviolent crimes such as burglaries, thefts, child services cases, just about any kind of criminal activity would be assigned to me to investigate.
How long were you in the investigation section there at the sheriff's office?
Approximately 3 years.
And at some point after that, is that when you applied to BCI?
Yes, it was. Actually, I was approached by agents from BCI and spoke with them and determined that it was something that I would like to do and applied, and eventually I did come aboard.
Tell us about that application process. What did you have to do to get a job at BCI?
It was a very long application process. They would do interviews with, obviously, me at my home. They interviewed my family at home out of my presence. They interviewed my son out of my son and my wife's presence. They interviewed my neighbors. They interviewed my coworkers, actually teachers from my schools, judges. That was just their portion of the background. There was a polygraph had to be taken. I had to submit to a polygraph, taken that, passed that. Financial documents, they look at your finances. They also, you have to take a test, a competency test. And it was a long process, probably, I'm thinking about a 9-month process. And
okay, before he gets to the good stuff and the questions that we all want to know about while he's going over his CV and his background, let's get in a break. We'll see you on the other side.
Fight smarter.
Hi, welcome back. So it's day 5 of testimony that's underway right now in Ohio in the Ohio Family Massacre trial. George Wagner IV is charged in connection to the Roden family killings. Prosecutors believe that the massacre was over a bitter custody dispute over a little baby girl. On the stand right now is Ohio criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw. Let's get you back into court. It's happening live.
Has been obtained and something else would need to be processed or collected in a specific manner, then that agent could be called.
Now, back in 2016, were you still in the crime scene investigation unit?
Yes, I was.
All right. And I imagine in order to do that job, there's a lot of training that you have to go through. Is that correct?
Yes, the training, you are never trained up enough. Our training is continuous.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, do they make you, in the crime scene unit, do they make you go through continuous annual training?
Absolutely, yes.
Let's talk about some of the training that you had to do your job as a crime scene investigator. Back in 2007, did you take a criminal investigative and analysis training course?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Tell us about that. What kind of stuff did you learn there, and what did they teach you?
I want to make sure that I have the right course. There were hundreds. Are you speaking of similar to a crime scene reconstruction?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, we would have courses, and the agency, BCI itself, feels that it is very important to have continuing training, and not only from within our organization, but from outside of our organization. And so we would bring multiple instructors to BCI or to the OPATA, we call it, the training academy next door to BCI. This particular time, I believe that we had trainers come from without our agency and train us in the field of crime scene reconstruction, which would entail a lot of the things that we'll probably be getting into today.
In 2009, did you do a 40-hour class in basic bloodstain pattern analysis?
Yes, I did. Once again, we had an individual who I feel is one of the best in the world, in my opinion. Obviously, he was my instructor. We brought him to BCI, instructor by the name of Paul Keish. He came to BCI. He trained us in basic bloodstain analysis, and obviously, I would have more training later.
Okay. In 2009, did you also do a 24-hour course in shooting reconstruction?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about that. How was that training? What kind of stuff did you learn?
In that training, we would learn the basics of shooting incident reconstruction, which would entail marking bullet holes, trajectories, and things of that nature.
Did you learn, when you talk about trajectory, is that basically angles?
Yes,
Okay.
Could be angles and elevations.
In that training, did you also learn how to track a bullet hole or bullet strike or ballistic event through a wall or through a structure?
Yes.
Okay. In 2011, did you do an advanced bloodstain pattern analysis course?
Yes, I did. Once again, my instructor would have been Paul Keish. He was brought in to London, and we trained for another 40 hours in getting in the advanced mode of the bloodstain analysis.
And in 2013, did you do a forensic shooting reconstruction course?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and again, tell us the kind of stuff that you learned there.
Once again, it was similar to what we had prior to that. My first course in that would have been with Mr. Hoos. We had a different instructor that had came in, Mr. Haig, and we had went over shooting incident reconstruction. It was both in classroom and out on the range. We had actually brought cars to our range and fired into those cars, and we were charged with finding out origins, basic origins of where the shot would have came from.
In 2020, did you take a course in fluid dynamics and bloodstain pattern analysis?
Yes, I did.
Okay, tell the jury, what'd you learn there? What's that?
Once again, I would learn things, again, on bloodstain analysis. More of the dynamics of the blood itself, the viscosity of the blood, or the thickness of it. We would say oil has different thicknesses for different purposes. Blood has a different thickness than water does, therefore it reacts different in different situations.
Have you received, in addition to, you talked specifically about some of the ballistics training that you've had and some of the blood training you have you had general crime scene training as well?
Yes.
And in 2000, did you do a course called Death Investigation?
Yes.
All right. 2001, did you actually go through an instructor training course?
Yes, I did.
And are you certified to be an instructor?
I was at that time under my employer for a certain period of time. We were told that we could not have secondary employment, so I was unable to do that, and my certificate lapsed. But I was certified to teach, I think it was 34 disciplines within the academy.
Okay, and as a matter of fact, for a while, did you actually do some teaching in those areas?
Yes, I did. I was an instructor at the Basic Police Academy in Lawrence County.
Have you also done some teaching for Collins Career Center?
Yes, I have.
And Buckeye Hills Career Center?
Yes.
And again, what did you teach in that area?
Basics of law enforcement and predominantly focusing on the crime scene portion of the investigation.
Are you currently up to date on all your mandatory annual training?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, several organizations such as the National Sheriff's Association, the Ohio, basically it's an investigators association in Ohio for forensics, several different members.
Okay. Have you had to come into court and testify about your examination of various crime scenes?
Yes, I have many times.
And from time to time, have you actually been called in to testify as an expert in areas?
I have been declared as an expert several times.
In what areas have you testified as an expert in the past?
I believe bloodstain analysis.
I want to take you now to 2016. Again, you were working BCI 2016, is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could, tell the jury, back in 2016, when you were in crime scene, how would a local agency that needed help on a case, how would they contact BCI? How would they get you, the crime scene unit, to come out and give them help?
At that particular time, there were different ways that we would be called in from time to time, but predominantly somebody would make a call, reach out to somebody in our London office, and from there the request would be evaluated, and then the agents would be notified. There were times when I would be called by a particular agency that was close to me, but then I would back up and it would go through the procedure of going through supervision and then being assigned that.
And back in 2016, how was the crime scene investigation unit for BCI organized? Were you in different quadrants of the state, different areas? How did that work?
Yes, it changed so often then. There were times when we were just called crime scene southeast, and then sometimes southwest, northeast, northwest. There was a period of time when it was just split in half. There was a period of time when we were expected to go in different directions. I believe in 2016, we were just in different quadrants of the state.
Okay. And what quadrant would you have been assigned to in 2016?
Predominantly southeast.
And back on April 22nd, 2016, were you called out to assist the Pike County Sheriff's Office with a crime scene that they had?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And again, did Pike County fall within the southeast, or were you called in to help with a different quadrant?
I believe at that point that it fell into that area or that zone of southeast.
Do you remember how you were notified that Pike County needed assistance, and what did you do when you got that call?
Yes, I was contacted early that morning by my supervisor. At that time, it would have been Special Agent Supervisor Gary Wilgus over the crime scene unit.
Okay. And what did he tell you, and what did you do when you got that call?
He basically gave not very specific information, because at that time we didn't have a lot of specific information, but he did say that there were multiple scenes, that they were death scenes, and they were located in Pike County. And I was told at that point to proceed to Pike County, and there was a rally point that was going to be in Piketon. I believe originally it was at the police department, and so I traveled there.
Okay. Any idea what time you initially got that call?
I don't have the exact time. It was earlier that morning. It was shortly after my shift had began.
And what time did your shift typically begin?
Somewhere around 8 a.m.
Did you report to the Piketon Police Department?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And talk the jury through, when you get there, what's going on, what's the plan, how are you basically directed to your next move?
When I arrived, we were in the process of still gathering information. People were still in the process of coming actually to the rally point so that we could be briefed on what had occurred. Eventually, at that particular time, we knew that there were 3 scenes, and so those scenes were kind of divided up among the agents, and I was assigned to scene 1, and eventually we did have a briefing there prior to traveling to our designated areas.
Okay. And were the scenes identified? You said you were assigned to scene 1. Were they identified in the order that they had been discovered? Do you know that?
I do not know that.
Okay. And do you know the address for scene 1, the scene that you were assigned to?
Yes, it's 4077 Union Hill Road.
Once you were assigned to that address, what were you instructed to do? What did you do?
When I actually arrived at that address, it was about 12:20 in the afternoon. I had another agent that was accompanying me there. It was Agent Price, and he and I were assigned to work this specific scene. I was assigned to be the primary agent responsible for the crime scene. When I arrived, the first thing I did was speak with the officers that were there. When I arrived, I noticed that a very large area had barricade tape around it, and I spoke to the officers I believe they were from the Pike County Sheriff's Office, regarding what had happened prior to my arrival.
Okay, let me ask you that. Is that standard course for when you show up on a scene, trying to get basic information with respect to what's happened before you got there? Is that something you do?
Absolutely,
on
yes.
every scene? And again, what the officers tell you, does that help guide you in understanding how you're going to do your work at that scene?
It can be a guidance, yes.
Okay. Can you tell us, when you showed up that morning, what did they tell you at that point, or what were you told that they knew at that point?
One of my first questions when I arrived was, who has been inside this residence? And from there, I was advised that Deputy Ball and Deputy Music had been inside the residence. And my question was pertaining toward first responders or law enforcement. I knew, obviously, that somebody had went in and found and discovered what was inside the scene. But at that point, I was thinking of elimination standards, things that I was going to have to collect from the individuals that went inside for elimination purposes later. That was one of the first questions that I found helpful to me in getting the answer. The fact that 2 officers had went in, and the fact that the officers advised that when they went in the door, they stayed close to one of the walls, and they traveled down that wall to the location of where they had found the individuals, and then they traveled back in the same direction.
Okay. When you talk about elimination standards, what exactly does that mean?
If I were to fingerprint the front row of this board here, looking for a suspect's fingerprints, even though all of you may not be my suspects sitting in the front row, I would probably have to ask for your fingerprints as well, because when I find those fingerprints from an unknown, I'm going to have to determine whether they are still my suspect unknown or whether they were deposited by you. So those would be elimination standards that I had taken from you.
Same thing, would the same thing apply with shoes? Obviously, if a shoe print becomes an issue, you want to know what kind of shoes your first responder had.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes. State's Exhibit A544.
Yes.
Do you recognize that area?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the jury what that is?
That's the residence located at 4077 Union Hill Road.
And when you showed up to that scene that morning, what vehicle do you take out to that scene?
We had large crime scene vehicles there. At the time, they were Ford F-350s, crime scene vehicles. They were outfitted with the equipment that we would need to sustain us through the crime scene process.
And when you show up on a scene like that, do you take note of the conditions, temperature, what the weather's like, anything like that?
Absolutely, yes.
And did you do that morning?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jury what were the conditions when you arrived there that day?
It was partly cloudy that day. Predominantly at that specific time, it was cloudy, and the temperature was about 72 degrees when I arrived.
If you could, again, first of all, does that exhibit in front of you, is that truly...
State investigators arrived to the scene there, one of 4 crime scenes in very rural Ohio. You know what? You're not going to miss anything. We're going to squeeze in a quick break. We're going to hit the pause button and pick right back up where we left off.
Blood all over the house.
A senseless tragedy in small-town America.
This was a pre-planned execution.
It was a feud between families that ended with multiple murders.
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing.
Wagner's brother and parents also charged.
It's very much a family affair. All for one for all.
It's a chilling story. It will be an intense trial.
The Ohio Family Massacre Trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Welcome back. Testimony underway right now in the Ohio Family Massacre trial. This morning, the state continues its case against George Wagner IV. Wagner faces multiple charges in connection to the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Prosecutors say that the Rodens were killed as part of a child custody dispute between 19-year-old Hannah Roden and the child's father, Jake Wagner. He is also expected to testify for the state. On the stand right now, state criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw. Let's get you back into court right where we left off.
Blood spatter. Can you tell us the difference on some of those different ways that blood can get onto an item?
Blood spatter or a blood stain is basically a deposit.
Basic layout of what you were observing there when you first pulled up. Where did you pull your truck? Where'd you go to rally with the local officers? And what were your basic observations when you very first pulled up?
May I stand, Your Honor?
Sorry.
May I stand?
Oh, sure.
It's a little hoarse. This would ultimately be the residence. When I first arrived at the scene, obviously you can see here that there's a lot of buildings, there's a lot of vehicles, there's a lot of things, but our primary focus at that particular time would have been this area. I put my crime scene truck on the roadway out here. I did not go inside the tape at that point. When the other crime scene agent, which would have been Special Agent Price, arrived, I had him park his crime scene vehicle outside. And I was very close to, this is a mailbox, and on the side it says 4077, and then it has the name Roden on it.
Thank you. After you initially met or made contact with the local officers, did you do a quick peek inside that trailer just to get your bearings and see what you had?
At some point, I did that, yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibits A192, A193, A194, A55, A155, and A183. Now, let me ask you this. As part of your duties that day, did you do extensive photography and documentation of that scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Prior to coming to testify today, did you have the opportunity to review the pictures that you took on that day?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And those pictures, when you reviewed them, had they been marked State's Exhibits A1 through A485?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And the pictures that you reviewed, when you reviewed them, did you initial and put the date on them that you reviewed them?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And all of those pictures, State's Exhibits A1 through A485, did they truly and accurately depict the pictures that you took that day?
I believe that they did when I reviewed them, yes.
Okay. When you first stepped up to do a peek inside, and again, this wasn't your full examination of the house. This wasn't when you were going. It's just an initial look. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us what stood out to you when you did that initial look.
When I initially went up to on the front porch and looked inside, I knew at that point that it was going to be something obviously I was going to have to back out on until I could do some other things. But at that particular point, I noticed that there were multiple bullet holes in the front of the house near the area of the door. There was actually a bullet hole through the screen door, the frame. The inside door, obviously there would be a front entrance door, and then there would be an exterior screen door. One of the things I noticed at that point is there was not a bullet hole in the front entrance door, and I noticed that there were blood stains on the door itself on the exterior portion. And having seen that led me to believe that the front door was most likely open when the bloodletting event had occurred. From there, I actually looked inside. I didn't go inside the residence at that point, but I did look inside.
Let me interrupt you real quick. Can you show the jury, where were you standing on the exhibit that's up, I think it's A544, where were you standing when you did this initial look?
I was standing right here on the front porch.
Okay. And you didn't go into the residence at this time, you just kind of looked in?
At that particular time, no, I did not enter.
Okay. I'm going to show you, I'm going to put up on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A192.
Yes.
Okay. You had talked about some blood splatter on the door. Tell us what that is. First of all, what's blood splatter, blood spatter? Can you tell us the difference on some of those different ways that blood can get onto an item?
Blood spatter or a blood stain is basically a deposit of blood on a surface due to an external force applied. In short, what that would mean is something occurred that caused somebody to bleed, and the thing that caused them to bleed caused blood to be expelled from that area. And so at that point, if it's deposited on a surface, then you would have a spatter stain or a blood stain.
Okay. And State's Exhibit A192, can you see it over, that you have in your hand? I know you can't see it on the screen above you. Can you see it on that one over there, by chance?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Barely.
Oh, there you go. You got it right there. The exhibit you have in your hand there, is that the same exhibit that's up on the screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And where in that picture is the blood that you recognize?
Down along the lower portion, do I need to stand to articulate that?
I'll bring you out there. I know it's kind of tight.
If you look in this area, you'll see stains here, here, here. There's multiple stains throughout.
Okay. And if you stay right there for a second, I'm going to put up on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A193. Okay. And again, can you tell the jury what's depicted in that picture?
Once again, there are spatter stains deposited on the exterior surface of the door, and you can see those here. Those in specific have characteristics to them. These, to size and distribution, there's not many characteristics there.
I'm going to put State's Exhibit A194 up on the screen. And again, can you tell the jury what they're looking at there?
If you look here and you see these stains, and remember the ones I said had characteristics to them and some that doesn't have many, you also see stains on the floor in these areas as well, out into here as well.
Okay. And what area is it, of the trailer is that?
That's near the front entrance door.
I'm going to keep you right there, if you would. I'm going to put up State's Exhibit A55. Okay. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at there, and then show them again on the diagram where that picture is taken from and what it's depicting?
This is the front porch that I spoke of earlier. There is the screen door that I told you earlier that appeared to have a bullet hole in the corner of it near the jamb. And in relation to where that is, once again, it is right here in this area.
Okay. Was it your testimony that when you looked at that area, you noticed the screen door had bullet holes, but the front door did not? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Give me State's Exhibit A155, if you could, please. If you could, tell the jury what they're looking at there and what area the house or residence that is.
This area, once again,
we want to thank our guest for this hour. Joe Tamburino is going to stick with us for the next hour, and we want to say thank you to Karen Felicia Nance in California. She has other obligations. We want to thank her. Also, we want to be transparent. There are a few judges' orders there in Ohio where our cameras are right now. We can't show bloody crime scene photos. Of course, we wouldn't show things graphic anyway. More testimony when we return. Happy Friday to you. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Matt Johnson, in for Ted Rollins on this Friday. Testimony is underway at this hour in the largest murder case in modern history there in Ohio. It's a case against defendant George Wagner IV. The defendant faces aggravated murder and more than a dozen charges for the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Jury heard testimony yesterday from several family members of the Rodens, including the son of one of the victims. And also in Connecticut, when we can't show you testimony there. In Connecticut, we were following the defamation case against far-right radio host Alex Jones. That resumes any moment. The jury will decide how much money Jones should pay the Sandy Hook families after calling the school shooting a hoax. A representative of the Alex Jones media company returns to the witness stand for a 3rd day this morning. But first, let's start in Pike County, Ohio. The first witness of the day is a state criminal investigator, Shane Hanshaw. He is testifying about the crime scene. You saw that last hour, and we want to be transparent with you. We will not broadcast anything that's graphic. And also, the court does not want us to show any exhibit that shows blood, so we can't show it to you. But let's take you back into court right where we left off.
This area, once again, this would be the I believe that's the front porch area, and you can see the screen door in a closed position here, and then you begin to see multiple bullet holes in that area. Some of what you see here were not bullet holes. They were holes from maybe a previous handle or something of that nature, but we were able, based on its appearance, to tell that one of them appeared to be a bullet hole.
Okay. And you said you were able to look in to the general area of that living room. Can you give me State's Exhibit A183, please? Okay, walk the jury through State's Exhibit A183. What are they looking at there? What are they seeing?
Let's start with this corner. You see plywood in this corner, and then you see something here that would be the front door. That would be the jamb of the front door. So this now tells you my general location when looking in and taking this photograph. From that general area, you will see what would be transfer stains here in blood, and they're in the form of maybe a drag. It appeared that the bloodletting event had occurred within the residence, and the individuals were drugged throughout the residence. Over here you see another area where a body was turned and then drugged to the same area of the residence. Also, you see partial footwear impressions in blood in that area.
When you initially looked into that residence, again, was that all readily apparent to you? And does that truly and accurately depict the way that area looked from that door?
Yes, it did.
Okay, you can go ahead and have a seat. So at that time, after you did that initial look into the residence, did you immediately go in and start analyzing that scene, or did you back out and was there more work to be done first?
When I first arrived, and obviously we had the briefing, and then I would have eventually went to the front door. Some of these photographs we've shown you are photographs that were taken later once we were inside. But earlier on, there was photographs that were taken from the front porch that would show these individual characteristics within the scene. And at that point, seeing what I just showed you there in the photograph, I felt that I needed to back out. We have access. We actually, at that time, we had 3D scanners, and they were, we only had a few, and so they were divided between the southern units and the northern units. And our unit had one, and we would kind of share that scanner. And so I felt that it very important to back out from that scene and be able to bring our 3D scanner in and to scan the interior and the exterior of the scene prior to us doing anything.
Take a few minutes to tell the jury about these 3D scanners. What is a 3D scanner? How does it work? Or what do you use it for?
It's a documentation tool, and it's a measuring device. It's a very complex piece of equipment that does very simple things. In short, it will take images of something. It will give you an accurate representation of something by scanning millions of points. It also is a device that will give you elevations so that you basically know where you are in that area. If you've ever seen surveyors, modern surveyors, they basically use the same thing. And it also gives you measurements. So it takes measurements, elevations, and gives you an image.
Okay. And back on April 22nd, 2016, did you have actual physical possession? You personally have physical possession of your 3D scanner?
I did not, no.
Okay. Did you have to call one of your partners in to come do the scan?
Yes. Based on geographical location of where we lived, it was determined that it would be better if it was centralized, and so another agent was assigned that at that time. And so, no, I did not have one.
Okay. With respect to the 3D scan of this scene, did you actually conduct, or were you the person who did the scan of this scene?
No, I did not.
Okay. Yeah, was there a little bit of a wait time or delay while that other agent brought that 3D scanner down with respect to processing the inside of that trailer?
Yes, there was a delay.
Okay. While you were waiting for that other agent to show up and do that scan, did you do other work around the property?
At some point, yes. At some point, we were notified that a search warrant had been obtained. Once we were notified that a search warrant had been obtained, Special Agent Price and myself began somewhat of an exterior walkthrough. When you do a walkthrough, it's relatively a search at that point, but it's not the primary search. So we did a walkthrough for documentation purposes, and we walked the exterior of the property, taking photographs from as many angles and locations as possible.
Let's talk about that. When you roll up onto a scene like this, or you're called to a scene like this, you don't really know too much of what's going on or the background when you first get there. Is that correct?
That's true, yes.
Okay. And is it pretty much standard practice before you enter onto one of these properties to try to obtain a search warrant or some legal authority to actually be able to go on the property?
Yes, we attempt to obtain a search warrant. It's obviously it's not always a sure thing, but we attempt to obtain a search warrant. In a case like this, there are too many unknown factors not to make that attempt. In other words, we just didn't want to go onto this property and begin the process without having that authority. Okay.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, we did.
Once you got the search warrant and you felt you could move around the property, is it pretty much standard to document the outside of a property or a scene like this?
It is for me, yes it is.
Okay, and walk the jury through how you do that and why that's important.
Well, what I want to do is paint a picture for the purposes of why we're here today. I want to be able to walk you through what originally was there, and not only what I would have seen, but what the camera will get in a photograph. I want you to be able to see that. It's also for evidence purposes. Things change over time, and we want to preserve that as best we can.
Okay. And when you document a scene, is there a standard way you do it? You go from outside in, you go from right to left. Is there some pattern that you use, or is it scene dependent?
It can depend upon the scene. It can dictate some things, but in my mind, I always had a process that I wanted to go through, and I wanted to back up to an area where I thought was relevant, and then I would always go a little further, and I would start my documentation there. In this particular case, it led me down into the woods, out onto the roadway, many different locations.
Okay, so right now, court is about ready to take a minor break as testimony will resume. Don't worry, you're not going to miss anything, but it's a good time for us to squeeze in a quick break. More testimony in the Ohio Family Massacre trial when we come back.
2510.
Testimony is underway in the Ohio Family Massacre trial as the state presents its case in chief against George Wagner IV. Wagner faces multiple charges in connection to the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Prosecutors say that the Rodens were killed as part of a child custody dispute between 19-year-old Hannah Roden and the defendant's brother, Jake Wagner. On the stand right now is criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw. He's detailing the multiple crime scenes that he was brought in to help process. Let's take you back to court right where we left off.
All right, I'm going to hand you another stack of pictures. If you could, just take a look at those pictures. I'll take my sticky off of it. And again, check the back for me, make sure your signature's on there. Not your signature, your initials.
Yes, my initials and the date.
And do you recognize that stack of pictures that I just handed you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you recognize them as pictures that you took as part of your work in this case?
Yes.
And again, do those pictures truly and accurately depict the areas that you photographed that day?
Yes, sir, they do.
Can you give me State's Exhibit A1? All right, put up on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A1. The A1 that is on the screen, again, do you recognize it as State's Exhibit A1 that you looked at?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell the jury what's depicted in this picture and why you take that type of picture?
It sounds trivial, but I want something to document where I was at that particular time and location. I said earlier that there would be this photograph, and I recall taking this photograph. My vehicle would have been just behind where I was standing when I took this photograph.
Okay. I'm going to see if we can do this by keeping you seated, just so we don't have to get you up and down. Do you have your... Can you point to where that picture would have been taken?
Yes. Somewhere in this vicinity right here is where I would have been.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A2. And again, State's Exhibit A2 that's up on the screen, does that truly and accurately depict the State's Exhibit A2 that you took as part of this, your work in this case?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what's depicted in this picture and where on that overhead diagram you would have taken that picture from?
State's Exhibit A2, obviously, is a photograph. That photograph would be of this area crossing the driveway. And remember, the first exhibit was here, and I was back here. And so now it's almost a picture of coming around to the entrance of the residence.
Okay. Does that truly and accurately depict the way that driveway looked when you were out there doing your work on April 22nd, 2016?
It does, yes.
All right. Mr. Junk, you just click over to the next one. I'm going to put up what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A3. Can you tell us the State's Exhibit A3, again, that's up on the image, truly and accurately depict the A3 that you reviewed as part of your work in this case?
Yes.
Okay. You tell us what we're looking at in that picture and where on the diagram that's taken.
The last two photographs I showed you on the diagram were of the front entrance and the mailbox. I'm in the same general location out on the roadway. I'm just working my way in almost a counterclockwise manner, and you're beginning to see the residents in the background. So I would be here, and you would see the residents in the background.
Okay. The silver truck that's depicted right there in the driveway, did you see that in the picture?
Yes.
Can you show us where that truck is in the overhead diagram?
I believe it would be in that area right there.
Okay. Does that truly and accurately depict the way that area looked on April 22nd, 2016?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A5. Again, can you tell the jury what we're looking at there? And again, is that the A5 that you reviewed as part of your work in this case?
Yes, it is. It represents a photograph that I took on that day. What you're seeing here is I'm now moving around this area a little more. One of the things that you'll notice throughout the photographs is they will always overlap. There will be something in one photograph that you will see again in the next photograph. And that's for purposes of being able to orient those as to where you were. It's not always possible to do that when you get into smaller items, but predominantly we try to overlap those photographs. So as you can see the truck there and see the truck in the photograph, that will give you the location I'm standing.
Can you give me State's Exhibit A6? Again, same thing. Can you tell us what we're looking at there and where on the board that picture was taken from?
I would now be over in this area, again working in a counterclockwise manner. And if you look in the corner of the photograph, again, you'll see that truck.
Okay. Now, let me ask you a couple follow-up questions on this picture. You were working this scene right here, which is 4077.
Yes.
Did you have other agents down working this scene as well?
There were other agents in that vicinity working, yes. I did not travel to their scene at that time, but yes, they were in this location.
Okay. And again, where were you taken? Where'd you take that picture from?
This general area over in here.
Okay. So between the building you did, 4077, and that location, again, is there a garage depicted and the semi-trailer depicted? Can you see those items as well?
Yes, I can.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes. Well, let me back up. Does that truly and accurately depict the way that area looked on that day?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A7. Again, same thing. Walk us through what we're seeing there and where on the diagram that picture was taken.
I'm basically now over in this area, and I'm shooting back in that direction with my camera, and you can very faintly see the rear end portion, the bed of that truck in that photograph. So once again, we can use that to orient ourselves as to where we are.
So once again,
Repeat, you said once again, we can use that to orient. She didn't pick you up, court reporter didn't pick you up.
Yeah, we can orient where we were based on that vehicle and its location.
Okay. What exhibit is that? Do you have that?
7, A7.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A8. Again, tell us what that is and where on the diagram that picture was taken.
Exhibit A8, once again, is a photograph. And now I'm down in this area. So I started here, I'm working my way around here. You can no longer see the truck, but in the last couple of photographs, you were able to see the container, the truck container. And now you can orient yourself as to where I am by the container being in the background.
Hey, Hanshaw, I'm going to try to do something with you here real quick. See if we can. Let's try to leave that there. All right. Does that truly and accurately depict the way that area looked on that day?
Yes, it does.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A9.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us, again, what we're looking at there and where that picture's taken from?
I'm now over in this location of the property. There was a small roadway down, and we followed along that roadway, and we looked in that area for things such as footwear, any kind of thing that we thought could be considered as evidence. And I'm taking a photograph back toward the house. In that photograph, kind of entwined in the trees, you can see the rear portion of that container, the white container with the orange stripe.
Truly and accurately depict the way that area looked on that day?
Yes, sir, it does.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A10.
Now moving around this area, if you look at the photograph in the central portion of the photograph, you can see the residence that was where the crime scene was, where our victims were, and I'm down over the hill, basically on that little roadway.
All right. I'm going to skip to State's Exhibit A12. All right, again, I've got State's Exhibit A12 up on the screen. Can you tell us where that picture is taken from and what we're looking at there?
Yes, this photograph is taken. It's of the residence, the Roden residence earlier that we saw, the mailbox. And I'm almost directly behind that residence down in the wooded area.
State's Exhibit A13.
It's another photograph, still on that basic roadway, and I'm traveling in a clockwise manner, and you can see in the center of the photograph there, you can see the residence as well.
State's Exhibit A14.
Still traveling in the same direction. My focus is on the residence and anything in between the residence and where I'm standing, and you can faintly see the roof of the residence from the photograph.
Were you able to look at, before we go to the next one, were you able to look at those pens? Could you see, did you examine those pens or what was in those pens? Did you look at that at all?
Those, I believe, were for chickens were housed in those.
Okay. State's Exhibit A15. Again, can you show us now, show us on the diagram where you're taking that picture from and where you're pointing back to?
I'm now down in this area, photographing back toward the residence.
Okay. State's Exhibit A16. Where are we at there, and what are you picturing?
Down over in that area, you can see some of the containers, vehicles, and a lot of the buildings and storage areas on the property.
Okay. And at some point later, were you able to go and actually process or look at some of those outbuildings?
Yes.
State's Exhibit, what was that I just showed? A15 or A16?
16.
Let me go State's Exhibit A17.
Yes.
Can you tell us what we're looking at there and where that picture was taken from?
Yes, I'm still down in that portion of the property shooting photography back toward the residence or the general location of the residence. And once again, I'm trying to capture as much and preserve in a photograph as I can at that point.
Okay, so you have the state investigator there that was brought in, the criminal investigator, Shane Hanshaw. He's really laying out for the jury the location of the first spot that he was to investigate of the 4 crime scenes. Don't worry, we're gonna slip in a quick break here, and we will pick right back up of the Ohio Family Massacre trial when we come back.
Fine.
Welcome back to Court TV Live on your Friday. So the jury is hearing testimony this morning from the state criminal investigator in the Ohio Family Massacre trial. Defendant George Wagner IV, right there, faces multiple charges in connection to the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw is testifying about the multiple and gruesome crime scene locations that he processed, where those bodies were found. Let's get you back into court right where we left off.
State's Exhibit A18?
Yes.
Can you tell us where we're at and what we're looking at?
Yeah, I'm now moving toward the residence and still back down in this area. We see outbuildings, we see vehicles. Nothing really remarkable in the photograph other than for document purposes.
State's Exhibit A19?
A19 again, I'm in that general area. Now I'm beginning to pan out from that area and try to take photographs from all angles of the things that surround me.
State's Exhibit A20?
Moving up a little closer toward this portion, and obviously there's a lot of equipment there and vehicles there. Nothing remarkable at the time.
State's Exhibit A21?
You're beginning to see me up in this area now, looking back toward that large barn that was adjacent to the residence.
And did you go into that barn? Do you remember what was in that barn?
At some point, I did go into the barn. There were some animals in there. I believe there may have been some dogs in there. Some very large livestock in that area as well.
Okay. State's Exhibit A22.
It's a picture basically for documentation purposes of the large outbuilding or a old barn there next to the residence.
State's Exhibit A23.
It's just another angle of the last photograph, and I'm moving up toward what would be Union Hill Road at that point.
And again, is this part of your just wide, broad sweep around the property?
Yes, it is.
State's Exhibit A25.
I'm now over in this area, kind of looking back that direction, and you can see that I've come full circle, and you can actually see in the center of the photograph the truck that I referenced earlier in the photographs.
And State's Exhibit A26.
Same basic location, I've just turned to another angle to get a photograph of the side of the building.
State's Exhibit, I'm going to skip to, was A27, I'm sorry.
A27, I'm moving again toward Union Hill Road. You're beginning to see barricade tape now. So that would let us understand how far beyond the scene that we actually did go for documentation purposes.
Skip to A29.
This area, once again, I'm moving out toward Union Hill Road, down in this area here, photographing back, and you can faintly see barricade tape around the actual residence itself in the center of the photograph near the front of the van.
Skipping to A31.
Just continuing now back out on Union Hill Road and trying to make full circle. I'm approaching what would be the location of where my vehicle would have been parked.
Do me a favor, can you show from this picture on the overhead diagram, are you able to pick up some of those vehicles again, where those vehicles were?
This line of vehicles here, so I would have been in that area there.
A32.
Once again, just a different angle, moving toward my vehicle or the location of where the mailbox would be.
Okay, let me ask you real quick. Give me, just click ahead to A33 for me. Click back to A32. Okay. State's Exhibit A32. On a point right there on the far right, and then indicate where I just pointed. That silver truck there, was that the truck that, again, you depicted earlier on from a back view that was in the driveway?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit A33.
I'm basically in the same location, but now I've moved just to a different angle and still traveling in the direction of the mailbox.
We're going to move to State's Exhibit A54. After you do that initial broad sweep of the property, as part of your work at that scene, do you then go around and do a close-up documentation of the trailer 4077 Union Highway?
Yes, I do.
And what's the purpose of that?
If you recall earlier, I talked about we will take an overall general photograph and we will try to overlap those photographs so that we could put those together into a chain and you would see one continuous picture. Now that we move in, we're looking for finer detail, but we're unable to overlap as much because now we're focusing on something closer. But you can use the first photographs as a reference to where we were when we take the next line of photographs. So if you couldn't see this orange mower in relation to where it was with the truck now, but prior to that, you would be able to see that because it's a wider angle photograph.
State investigator there going over the broad sweep of one of the 4 crime scenes after the rodents were killed in 2016. I'm being told we have to slip in a quick break. Don't worry, we're going to pick up testimony right where we left off. You're watching Court TV Live.
Feud between families
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing. It's a chilling story. The Ohio Family Massacre trial.
Live coverage today on Court TV.
To get a free quote.
Welcome back to Court TV Live on your Friday. I'm Matt Johnson in for Ted Rowlands. Testimony is underway right now in the Ohio Massacre Family Massacre trial this morning. Defendant George Wagner IV faces 8 counts of aggravated murder and more than a dozen other charges in the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Prosecutors claim Wagner, along with his brother and parents, are all connected to the murders. The defense claims George Wagner had nothing to do with the murders in the first place. On the stand right now, state criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw. Let's get you back into court right where we left off.
So State's Exhibit A54 that you have there on the screen, you pointed out an orange mower. When you were at that property that day, did you find or did you notice an orange bush hog or mower in front of that property?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and again, is that depicted in that picture?
Yes, it is.
Can you show the jury on the diagram or the overhead picture where that is located?
You can actually see the mower right in this area here, in front of the residence.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A56.
Yes. Now I'm still going in a somewhat of a counterclockwise direction. If you would reference the last photograph, you would see the corner of the residence and the satellite dish. You can again see that as well as the front door.
State's Exhibit A57.
Again, this would be a photograph of the end of the residence as I'm traveling clockwise.
And again, is that the condition you found it in that day?
Absolutely, yes.
And did you find, does it appear that that window at the far end of that trailer was open?
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit A58.
Once again, Exhibit A58 is a photograph that I've taken of the corner of the residence. When we turn a corner on the residence, we try to get both sides of the residence so that when we look back at it later, we'll be able to determine an orientation.
State's Exhibit A59.
Now directly behind the residence.
A60.
I panned to my right just a little bit, still standing behind the residence because I wanted to pick up the corner of the residence in relation to the barn.
A61.
This photograph, I've moved in closer to the rear of the residence.
I'm going to skip to A63.
This is a photograph, A63. One of the things I try to do is document the condition of doors and windows in a residence.
State's Exhibit A65.
A65, again, I'm at the corner of the residence, still working my way around in a counterclockwise manner.
A67, going to jump to A67.
I'm now at the other end of the residence. Earlier we seen a photograph where the window was open. I've now traveled to the opposite end of that. This would be the exterior of the wall of the interior bedroom.
A68.
I'm moving around to the front of the residence now, and you can see the porch in the background, so now we know where we are in the photograph.
And finally, A69.
A69, I've come full circle, moved all the way around the residence, back to the front.
At some point, as you went around the outside of that property, actually close up to that trailer, did you begin to notice various pieces of evidence that you may want to collect?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits A94, A95, and A96. You put up State's Exhibit A94 for me. All right. The image that's depicted on the screen there, State's Exhibit A94, again, is that the same A94 that you have in your hand?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And could you tell the jury, again, on the diagram, where is this picture depicting and what are you trying to depict there?
If you look over in this general area, you'll see the mower deck, the front of the residence, and in the photograph, you can now see the corner of the mower deck in the front of the residence in relation to where this item number 1 would have been located.
Okay. And can I get State's Exhibit A95? What's depicted in State's Exhibit A95?
Basically the same as A94, however, we've moved in. As I said earlier, we take a wide-angle photograph so that you can orient that. So if I just showed you 95, you wouldn't know where it was located on the property. Basically, here you do, and it's a photograph of what appeared to be a Mountain Dew can.
And State's Exhibit A96?
A96 is simply a close-up photograph of that can.
As part of your work in this case, did you collect State's Exhibit, or did you collect the Mountain Dew can that's depicted in that picture?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 486. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the jury what is State's Exhibit 486?
It's packaged in a brown paper bag, has evidence tape on it. It has my original initials on it. I did collect and seal this.
Do me a favor, could you cut it open and pull it out for us?
I need gloved hands or should I not?
Yeah, go ahead and put the gloves on.
A little small for my hands.
Oh. I got access to you. Trade you up. I'll give you the meetings.
Thank you. Once again, it'll be a brown paper bag. This would be, appears to be the original bag. On the day that we collected this, it's my initials on it, and there would be the actual item.
Okay, so let's walk through that. Tell the jury, when you collect a piece of evidence from a scene, how do you go about collecting it? How do you package it? How do you label it? What do you do with it?
I should go back by, if you don't mind, by indicating how we were dressed at that time. When we processed this scene, we were dressed in full Tyvek suits. Tyvek would help keep us from contaminating the scene. We were also dressed with Tyvek boots on our shoes, over the exterior of our shoes, so that we would not contaminate things within the scene. We would also have gloves. For purposes here today, I don't know if I'll be able to change my gloves out after every piece of evidence, but when it would come to a critical piece of evidence, if I collected this piece of evidence at the scene, after I collected it and packaged it, those gloves would come off. They would be gone, and before I got another piece of evidence, I would have to change my gloves. Because we're looking at DNA and the possible transfer of DNA from one item to another. For purposes of today, I may not do that if it's okay. But our procedure would be to photograph it. It would be to document it in a program we have we call CrimePad. From there, we would make a label and we would actually package the evidence. When I processed crime scenes, I did things a little different than other agents. Everybody has their things they do. I collected, documented, and packaged every piece of evidence as it was collected and found.
Whose DNA do you think is going to be on that Mountain Dew can? Let's bring in our guests and let's discuss this. We have criminal defense attorney Joe Tamburino here in the studio, and joining the conversation, former prosecutor, trial attorney Vonda Sargent in Seattle, Washington. Vonda, always great to see you. Since you're just joining us this hour, what sticks out to you about this testimony? It was long about outside of this trailer.
It was very long, but what stuck out to me was the detail and the amount of evidence or lack thereof to prove, to exculpate George Wagner. And by that, I mean that there's not going to be an opportunity for the defense to argue that the investigation was flawed or shoddy or incomplete. They were extraordinarily thorough and gave us a complete 360-degree view of that home and all the area around it. And so I was very impressed with this investigator and all of the work that he did to make certain that there's no way for the defense to say, well, you didn't look at this and we don't have a picture of that and you didn't look at this. Or, it was very impressive, quite frankly, just how much time that he spent making certain that he took a picture of every inch of that property surrounding that building, that home. And it's going to be interesting to see how much evidence he's going to be able to get from the home.
You're exactly right, Vonda, and he was talking about how he was changing out his gloves as he collected each item that is in those multiple evidence bags that we were just showing pictures of. But Joe Tamburino, where do you think that this is going? Do you think that we are going to get heavily into DNA in this case?
Well, we're going to get into some DNA, not heavily into DNA, because, you know, the issue as to whether or not who was doing the shooting, we know. Jake said he was doing the shooting. The DNA that's going to be important is, does it tie it to George? I mean, that's going to be important, and that's why he's talking about transference problems. But the one thing I would say is the prosecutor really needs to start identifying which crime scene this is. Is this the Hannah Gilley crime scene? Is this the Hannah Roden crime scene? Is this the Ken Roden crime scene? Because right now we're going through crime scenes, but still not sure who were the victims in the particular house.
Yeah, Vonda, that's something that we were talking about as testimony was underway here in studio. Is that something that you were thinking about at the same time with the storyline and kind of connecting it to the jury? You don't want to lose them.
Yes, absolutely. I was wondering whom it was that was in that home that had been murdered. And I also really wanted him to kind of move it along a little bit more quickly. I think he could have done a blanket or all of these photographs. They all depict accurately the scene as you saw it at the time, and just get him to do that right off the top. And I agree with Joe that we need to move it along and let us know where we are and who it is that we can expect to be in that home.
All right, we have to leave the discussion there. Vonda, thank you so much. We're approaching the top of the hour. Vonda's going to stick with us, and thank you so much, Joe, for being with us in studio. I know that you're going to be on with Julie Grant later this afternoon.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure being with you. All right, still ahead, we're going to have more live testimony in this Ohio family massacre trial. Court TV Live, straight ahead.
You need now.
And good Friday morning to you. This is Court TV Live. I'm Matt Johnson in for Ted Rollins today. It's a busy Friday morning. Court TV cameras are in 2 courtrooms today. In Ohio, testimony is still underway in the family massacre murder trial. George Wagner IV is accused in the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. One of the witnesses yesterday was asked to point out the defendant there in court. This marks one of the first times that the prosecution has drawn attention to George Wagner since testimony began on Tuesday. And in Connecticut, testimony in the Alex Jones defamation case is still underway. You can watch this streaming on CourtTV.com. The jury is listening to a 3rd day of testimony from a representative of Jones Media Company. She's currently still under direct examination, and her testimony, well, evasive at times. We'll get you back into the testimony into Pike County right now in Ohio. The first witness of the day is a state criminal investigator, Shane Hanshaw. We'll pick right back up where we left off.
Okay. And then once it's packaged and collected, what do you do with it from there?
That would depend on the circumstance and the situation. In this particular case, it would be secured in one of our vehicles, one of our crime scene vehicles, and it could go through various stages after that. It just depends on the situation.
You talked about the label that you give it. Again, is each item you collected given a unique item number, a unique identification piece so you can kind of keep track of it through the process?
Yes, it is. This would be the original label that I had printed out that day and attached to the packaging.
And the item number that you give it, does that typically correspond to what's known as a photo placard?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And in the exhibit that we still have up on the screen is the photo placard for this item, obviously, of, picture.
Yes.
Okay. Is that what item number for your purposes was that item?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Item number 1?
Yes, item number 1. And you also saw a placard in the photograph that had a number 1, and so those 2 would correspond.
Now, when you collect a piece of evidence from a scene, ultimately, where does it end up?
It can end up either at our facility, storage facility in London. It could go to an agency, or it could be submitted directly to the laboratory for analysis.
And if you're going to submit something to the laboratory for analysis, how does that work? How do you make that request? How do you do that?
We fill out a submission sheet, and then we would take the item to the laboratory, and it would be accepted by the laboratory. They would then give it their lab number, and eventually, hopefully, it would make it to the lab worker, and they would work that piece of evidence.
And ultimately, in this case, Was some of the evidence that you collected at the scene submitted to the lab for DNA testing?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I believe the parties have a stipulation with respect to State's Exhibit 486.
That's correct, Judge.
All right, what is that stipulation?
The stipulation with respect to State's Exhibit 486 would be that the DNA on this exhibit, which is scene number 1, the Mountain Dew can collected from in front of 4077 Union Hill Road, contains Gary Roden's DNA.
All right, so the exhibit number is 486, collected at scene 1, and the stipulation is that the item depicted there, that exhibit, which is that Mountain Dew can,
correct,
contains Gary Roden's DNA.
Correct.
Is that just for a moment?
All right, joining us now, watching along with us, is former prosecutor, trial attorney Vonna Sargent in Seattle, Washington. Vonna, good morning again. What sticks out to you about this bit of testimony?
It was a bit anticlimactic. There was a very, very big buildup. One would expect that it was going to be one of the Wagners. I'm not quite certain why we spent so much time on this Mountain Dew can when it really doesn't help move the case forward. So that's what really stuck out to me about this testimony.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking. Was I thought that they were doing a big buildup to one of the Wagners, maybe the guy sitting over at the defendant table, that it was going to be his, and then it wasn't.
Right. And it was just, and we're going to stipulate. I mean, I'm not sure where they're going. They seem to be spending a lot of time giving us a lot of details that we may or may not need. But in this case, we really spent a lot of time on this Mountain Dew can, and it doesn't move our case forward, or their case forward, rather. It just doesn't move the case forward, and I'm not sure where they're going with this, and they're going to run the risk, if they spend this amount of time on every piece of evidence, of losing the jury. At some point in time, you have to point at some evidence towards the defendant, and we're not doing that yet.
All right, well, the judge is now addressing a jury, so let's listen together.
The stipulation, which you've heard here, but let me just sort of repeat this. The DNA on scene 1, photo EX1, which is exhibit number 486, trial exhibit number 486, but it's given, I think that these other numbers also appear on there, EX1 CSI number 40, but the exhibit number for trial purposes is exhibit number 486, which is a Mountain Dew can found in front of Chris Sr.'s trailer, contains Gary Roden's DNA. That's a stipulation. You are to accept that as if established by evidence, all right? Now you may continue your...
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Trump, can you give me State's Exhibit A97? In addition to that Mountain Dew can, did you find a couple other items out front of 4077 Union Hill Road?
Yes, sir.
We have up on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A97. Can you tell the jury what's depicted in that picture and where in the scene that is?
Exhibit A97 would be item number 2. You see a number 2 placard. You really can't see the actual evidence, but the general purpose is to see the placard so it can be orientated as to where it is. And once again, we would do follow-up photography.
Okay. In addition to that placard number 2, is there another placard that's identifiable that you can see in that picture?
Yes, you can faintly see what's going to be item number 3. It's over closer to the actual mobile home itself.
Okay.
And again, faintly just above the crime scene tape.
Are those the locations you found those 2 items A98. Can you tell the jury what they're seeing in State's Exhibit A98?
Once again, you see my placard number 2, the scaled placard, and you see a cigarette butt, or a partial cigarette butt there.
As part of your work in this case, did you collect that cigarette butt?
Yes, sir, I did.
Can you tell the jury how you collected it, what process you used to package it, and what you did with it when you had it collected?
Yes, collecting it, once again, it would be in its own container, which would be this yellow envelope. This appears to be the original envelope. It has the original label that I put on the front. It also has my initials on the back. At that point, it would have been collected. We used small disposable tweezers. They were little plastic blue tweezers, and we would carry them by the bags, and that would be used to collect this, place it in the envelope, and then it would be discarded.
And that has an evidence sticker or exhibit sticker on it of State's Exhibit 487, is that correct?
Yes, it does.
Mr. John, can you give me State's Exhibit 99? State's Exhibit A99 is up on the screen. Can you tell us what's depicted in that exhibit, please?
Yes, once again, this would be a photograph. You can see here a placard with a number 3 on it that we referenced in the last photograph, and an additional one, which is number 4. These were items of potential evidence as well.
Can you show me State's Exhibit 101, please? All right, we have State's Exhibit A101 up on the screen. Can you tell the jury what that is?
Yes, once again, it's item number 3. According to my placard, that would have been my evidence, item number 3, and it's another partial cigarette butt.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes. It's State's Exhibit A488. State's Exhibit A488. Can you tell us what that is, please?
Yes, I have a yellow envelope. Once again, it has my original label that I would have printed. On the back is my original initials and the tape.
Okay.
One packaged inside of that obviously would be the item number 3, which would be the partial cigarette butt.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A102 on the screen.
A102, again, it's a photograph that I'd taken. 2 photographs ago, we actually saw this number 4, and that photograph was taken, so now you have an orientation as to where number 4 is in relation to number 3. You can't quite see the evidence, but we will get there.
And State's Exhibit A103.
State's Exhibit A103. It's my item number 4. You can see a partial cigarette butt. If you look on the grass, you can actually see ashes that are contained there as well, indicating that it could have been most deposited there very recently. And it is my item number 4.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A489. Can you tell the jury what State's Exhibit A489 is?
Yes, it is the partial cigarette butt that we saw in the photograph. Actually, they're depicted now. There is my original label, and again, my initials on the rear.
State's exhibits, those last 3 exhibits that I handed you, were they all collected and maintained in the ordinary course of your duty there at BCI?
Yes, they were.
And ultimately, were those items that were stored so that they could be sent to the lab?
Yes.
Your Honor, we have another stipulation.
All right. Let's, if this is acceptable to counsel, let's do it this way. Since you've worked out these stipulations in advance of trial, let's have you state the stipulation exactly as you wish the jury to accept it. We'll have counsel over here indicate whether that's accurate or not, and then I will so instruct the jury.
Okay, yes, Your Honor. All right. The state and the defendant have entered into a stipulation with respect to State's Exhibits 487, 488, and 489, which are the 3 cigarette butts that this witness just testified to. That stipulation is that the DNA on the cigarette butt marked as State's Exhibit 487, which is item number 2, 488, which is item number 3, and State's Exhibit A 489, which is item 4, from the front of Chris Sr.'s trailer, contain the following DNA profiles. The butt identified as State's Exhibit 487, or item number 2, contains a mixture of DNA with Gary Roden contained in the mixture. The butts identified as State's Exhibit A 488, which is item number 3, and State's Exhibit 489, which is item number 4, contain Gary Roden's DNA.
Mr. Parker or Mr. Nash, on behalf of the defendant, does that accurately state the stipulation?
Yes, Judge.
And the jury is instructed you will so find each of those stipulations as read by counsel as if they had been, that those facts had been established by evidence. Right?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Right, some of the evidence being admitted there. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get in a quick break here. We're going to hit the pause button, so to speak, and pick right back up where we left off. We'll be right back.
Blood all over the
A
house.
senseless tragedy in small-town America.
This was a pre-planned execution.
It was a feud between families that ended with multiple murders.
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing.
Wagner's brother and parents also charged.
It's very much a family affair. All for one, one for all.
It's a chilling story. It will be an intense trial.
The Ohio Family Massacre Trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
JoinCalibrate.com.
And welcome back to Court TV Live. Testimony underway right now in the Ohio Family Massacre Trial as the state presents its case against George Wagner IV. Wagner faces multiple charges in connection to the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Prosecutors say that the Rodens were killed as part of a child custody dispute between 19-year-old Hannah Roden and the defendant's brother, Jake Wagner. On the stand right now is a state criminal investigator, Shane Hanshaw. He's detailing the items that he collected at the scene, and then they were later tested for DNA. Let's take you back to court right where we left off.
I put before you and the jury what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A545. Can you tell the jury what State's Exhibit A545 is?
Yeah, it's a basic sketch prepared of the residence from an angle, so an azimuth angle, as though you were looking down. Once again, you see the residence, you see the front porch. The other items that we just introduced, they would have been out in this general area and around through there. And now we're seeing an outbuilding that is incorporated into the diagram.
And is that something that BCI prepared as part of the work in this case?
Yes.
And with respect to that actual exhibit, does that focus on biological evidence that was collected from 4077 Union Hill Road?
Yes, I believe it does.
And as part of your work in that front porch area, in addition to the cigarette butts and the Mountain Dew can that were found in the yard, did you also find some biological evidence on that front porch?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibits A142 through A145. Mr. Jump, can you put A142 up on the screen for us? All right. I put State's Exhibit A142 on the projection screen for the jury. Again, does that treating accurately depict the way that area looked that day?
Yes, it does.
Can you tell the jury what they're looking at in State's Exhibit A142?
This is basically the front porch. This photograph, the photographer me would have been in this general area, shooting back in that direction. What you see in the photograph itself is what would be my item number 11, my item number 12, and item number 13. They are very faint traces of what appeared to be blood in each of those areas.
Okay. Again, is that something you observed as you did your work on that scene on that day?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 143. Just go ahead and click the next one. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at in State's Exhibit A143?
Exhibit 143 is a close-up. Obviously, in the last photograph, you saw the placard with the number 11. It's also represented here. And this is a substance that appears to be blood on this step.
If you could, walk the jury through when you collect blood from a scene. How do you do it? What's the technique? How do you obtain that blood, and what do you do with it?
I have a very specific thing that I always did when collecting blood, and would still do if I collected it today. Obviously, I would put fresh gloves on. At that point, I would have my container ready to deposit the evidence into it. And then we take sterile swabs. Sometimes they contain one swab. Most of the time, the sterile swab would contain just one swab, sometimes two. But in this case, there were one swab per container, and there was a specific area on that container that I always tore. I removed that. I took my swab. Now, depending on if the blood is dry or if the blood is wet. If the blood is wet, then you can just simply use the applicator, the cotton swab. You can take a standard of that, and then we would let that dry, and it would be packaged. When I say let it dry, you can put it into the container, leave the end open, and let that dry. If it is wet blood, then we would use sterile saline to wet the applicator so that we would be able to extract that swab.
Okay. And did you, as part of your work on this day, collect a swab of the placard 11 of that blood spot?
I believe I may have collected 2 swabs, yes.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A496. Do you recognize the markings on that package?
Yes, I do. It indicates my item number 11. The quantity is 2 swabs of suspected blood from the top step. This is my original label, and that is my initials.
And again, did you collect that in accordance with your training, in accordance with BCI SOP, and the way you testified today?
Absolutely, yes.
And what did you do with it once you collected it?
It was allowed to dry. It was completely packaged, sealed, and at some point it would have been released for processing or examination, I should say.
Released to the lab?
Released to another agent or directly to the lab.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, State's Exhibit A144. Again, State's Exhibit A144 that's up on the screen. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at there?
Yes, I believe this to be suspected blood on the sidewalk area of the in front of the residence.
And did you mark it with a photo placard and document it for the purposes of the trial?
Yes, I did.
And is that exact spot there, can you show the jury what spot that is on the diagram?
Would basically be in this area. You can see my item number 12 in the photograph, and it would be in that general area as well.
Did you also collect that item as part of your work in this case?
Yes, I did.
Would you have removed your gloves after you did 11 before you took a swab of 12?
Most likely I would have, yes. Anytime I work with something biological like that, we try to do that.
Okay. My handy what's been marked for identification purposes. It states Exhibit A497. States Exhibit A497. Do you recognize the markings on that package?
Yes, I do. Once again, it has my original label, appears to be my original packaging, and it does have my initials on the package.
And again, what is it? What'd you do with it?
This would be my item number 12, which would be 2 swabs of suspected blood collected from the paver in front of the residence, and it would have either been turned over to another agency, secured in an evidence facility, or directly taken to the lab for submission.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes. It states Exhibit A145.
Yes.
It states Exhibit A145. Can you tell the jury what they're looking at in that picture?
In Exhibit 145, you can see a placard, obviously with a 13 on it. In looking at this, it's very hard to see that there was actually residue of suspected blood there in the grass area. So from there, once again, the same process.
Can you show the jury where that suspected blood was in the diagram?
So here being the step was 11, and then there's the paver, and then there is a grassy area in front of the porch. It would have been in that general area.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes. It states Exhibit A498. States Exhibit A498. Do you recognize the markings on that item?
Exhibit 498, I do. It is my evidence number 13. And again, it has my original label, has my initials on the back. And I have it listed as a blood-like stain, and I had taken 2 swabs of that from the grassy area.
Okay. And again, states Exhibit the 498 that I just handed you? A 498 that I just handed you?
Yes.
Again, did you collect that according to your training, BCI, SOP, and store it the same way?
Yes, I did.
Again, do you know, were those items eventually sent to the lab, or were some of those items eventually sent to the lab for DNA testing?
I believe some of them were sent to the lab. After the processing of the scene, I would have ended up, we designated one individual at that point that was more centralized than I was, and that evidence went to that individual. And from there, things were then submitted and processed to the laboratory for analysis.
Give me 1 second. One moment. Your Honor, at this time, the parties, again, with respect to State's Exhibits A496, A497, and A498.
All right, why don't you state the exhibit then as you understand it to be agreed to, and then I'll ask Mr. Parker here.
Thank you, Your Honor. The parties agree that the swabs marked as Exhibits A496 and A497, which are items 11 and 12 in the pictures and for BCI purposes, were not submitted to the lab for DNA testing. The swab marked as Exhibit A498, which is item number 13, as contained in the pictures and the BCI records, was sent to the lab for DNA testing. And that evidence, or that swab, or those swabs, contained human blood that was matched to Gary Roden's DNA.
Mr. Parker, do you agree with the stipulation as stated, just stated by counsel with respect to A496, A497, and A498?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will accept each of those stipulations as if those facts have been established by evidence.
I don't know if you want to take the morning break now, but
it would probably be a good time to do that. We've been at it for a couple of hours or close to that.
All right, the defendant there, George Wagner, you can see him right there with his vest on, looking down, interested during when that admitted of evidence and the DNA evidence of the rodents were presented to the court. They're in their mid-morning break, so it's a good time for us to fit in a quick break. We'll be right back with more testimony here in the Ohio Family Massacre trial.
Immunity today.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Matt Johnson in for Ted Rowlands. The jury is hearing testimony right now this morning from state criminal investigator in the Ohio Family Massacre trial. Defendant George Wagner IV faces multiple charges in connection to the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Criminal investigator Shane Hanshaw is testifying about the multiple and gruesome crime scene locations that he helped process where the bodies were found. Now, when we left off, court had just gone to a mid-morning break. We were playing catch up, we were putting pause and getting you back into testimony. So now we've caught back up with tape and court is back in session along with this witness on direct examination. Let's go back to court.
For you and before the jury, what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit A546. Before the break, we were testifying about, or you were testifying about, some blood that you'd found in the front porch area. And again, is that general area depicted on that diagram?
Yes, it is.
Okay. In addition to the blood that you found in that area, did you also examine that front porch for signs of ballistic incidents or ballistics evidence?
Yes, sir, I did.
And take us through, if you could, explain what your observations were on the porch with respect to any signs of shots fired, ballistic evidence.
If you recall, a few photos back, we saw photographs of the front porch, and that would have had a railing around that porch. We began to, we're now working our way, as you can see, we're getting closer to the front door of the residence. We had 11, 12, and 13 down in this area. Now we're approaching the front door. And when we get into that area, we begin to see or better document the things that we had visually seen earlier. And you will see, or you may see, what we refer to as BE and then 1.0. The BE would represent ballistic event, and the 1.0 would represent a entrance of a bullet hole. When we got to the porch area and began to examine that, we got out to where you see the number 15 listed in this area, and there was some laminate flooring that was stacked up in that area. And looking through that, we actually located what we believe to be a partial bullet or a bullet in that area. And we did label that, and it would end up being item number 15/BE 1.0.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification purposes. The State's Exhibits A146, A149, A150, and A151. And Mr. Junk, if you could put A146 on the screen, please. All right, could you tell the jury what they're looking at in State's Exhibit A146, what's depicted in that picture?
Again, these are my photographs, and if you're standing down in front of the porch, and you recall earlier we saw photographs again with item number 11. Now we're in that general vicinity of that top step where item number 11 would have been found. If you look directly in front of you in the photograph down near the bottom of the mobile home where it meets the porch, you will see an item number 14.
Okay. And were you able to look at that, examine, and determine what was there or what caught your interest that caused you to label it item number 14?
It appeared to be a fragment or the jacketing from a bullet.
I'm going to show you what's been marked, or we're going to put up on the screen what's been marked for identification purposes. State's Exhibit A149. Again, can you tell the jury what they're looking at there?
Yes, we've been able to orient it in A146. Now we're moving up closer to item number 14, just to get a better general view of what that evidence is.
And State's Exhibit A151.
Exhibit 151, that would be a close-up shot of item number 14. We know its location based on the previous photographs, and we can see characteristics here that it appears to be a jacket from a copper jacket from a bullet.
Okay. With respect to what you marked as item 14, the bullet or the jacket that's depicted in that picture, first of all, does that truly and accurately depict the way it looked the day you found it on the porch?
Yes, sir, it does.
And again, tell the jury how you went about collecting that item.
This would be something that normally we would, once again, I spoke earlier of the blue disposable tweezers that we use. Normally, that's what we use to collect something of this nature.
Did you, in fact, collect that item?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes.
Okay, so blood samples and now bullet casings have been collected and being presented to the jury. We have to get in a quick break. Don't worry, we're not going to miss anything. We'll be right back with more testimony straight ahead.
The feud between families
came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing. It's a chilling story. The Ohio Family Massacre trial.
Live coverage today on Court TV.
I'm Vinny Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. There is so much on the line, so much at stake. Well, what was this case really about?
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan. Tonight at 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Experian Marketplace puts all the information in one place, which makes it really easy for me to compare the cards that I'm pre-approved for. Experian is amazing.
With Experian, everyone gets their FICO score free. Then nearly 80% get pre-approved credit card offers. Download the Experian app now.
Hi, it's me again. Listen to this. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check every month may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with the benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Check your zip code. It could be dynamite. Call now.
Call 1-800-561-2049. That's 1-800-561-2049 now.
So before joining Self, I had a horrible relationship with my credit.
I was honestly in need of a credit card, and I had been turned down in the past.
I wanted unshakable credit, and Self has helped make that possible.
Why are so many people turning to Super Beets crystals? Because Super Beets crystals give you the energy and blood pressure support you want from real beets without the beet taste.
This is Super Beets, and I swear by it. It gives me more healthy energy to keep up with my hectic schedule and supports healthy blood pressure.
Inspired by the Nobel Prize-winning discovery of nitric oxide as a blood vessel signaling molecule, Super Beets black cherry-flavored crystals unlock the nitric oxide boosting power of beet nutrients to help widen your blood vessels, supporting healthy blood flow, so your body can produce energy more efficiently. That's why over 120 professional and college sports teams use our beet crystals, because Super Beets not only supports healthy blood pressure, it also promotes energy and stamina for peak performance.
I'm Hunter Kemper. I'm a 4-time Olympian in the sport of triathlon. Super Beets, it helped me win big races late into my 30s. It's increasing your circulation, and that's why this product is so amazing.
Call now and find out how to get a free 30-day supply of Super Beets with your first order. Just 1 teaspoon of Super Beets gives you the functional benefit of 40 teaspoons of fresh beets without the beet taste. You'll also receive a free kit of nitric oxide indicator strips to measure your results, plus a free travel pack of our delicious Super Beets Chews with added grapeseed extract for powerful antioxidant support, perfect for on-the-go energy. Act now, and we'll even include free shipping and free returns. That's over $30 in free gifts, all backed by our 90-day money-back guarantee.
So do something good for your heart, your circulation, your blood pressure, and your energy. You'll love Super Beats or your money back.
This offer is only available if you call 1-800-383-4068 or go to superbeatsdeal.com. So call 1-800-383-4068 or visit superbeatsdeal.com right now.
Happening now, testimony underway in the Ohio family massacre trial. This morning, defendant George Wagner is on trial for the murder in the deaths of 8 members of the Roden family. Prosecution claims Wagner, along with his brother and parents, planned and executed the other family. The defense claims George Wagner was not the killer. On the stand now is a state criminal investigator going over some of the evidence he has collected, including bullet casings. Let's get you back to court.
I'm going to show you what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A499. Do you recognize the markings on that document?
Yes, it is my evidence number 14. It appears to be my original label documenting the contents. This packaging has my initials on the back from the time that it was collected.
Can you tell the jury what you remember being in that?
What I remember being in it, and I'm filling it here to see if it's there, is what represents item number 14 in the photograph, which would be this copper jacket.
Can you open State's Exhibit A499, please?
Yes. This exhibit, item number 14, which is my item number, it is in a small individual package now. Most likely would have been placed by a lab worker or a scientist or somebody that would have looked at this.
Okay. And again, do you recognize State's Exhibit A499 as the jacket that you collected on that day?
Yes, I do. This is what we collected, item number 14.
Your Honor, I request permission to publish this to the jury.
Any objections to that?
No objection.
All right. Nobody said.
Place that back in the envelope for me?
Yes, sir.
Was that item, again, collected, packaged, maintained, and stored in accordance with BCI standard operating procedure?
Yes, it was.
In addition to State's Exhibit 499, which was marked by photo placard 14, did you also look at that laminate flooring to see if there was a projectile in it?
Yes, we did look at the laminate flooring. On the, as you could have seen in the photographs earlier, there was a stack of laminate flooring, and on the outer edge, in other words, the edge that would be facing the road, which is the edge that you would see if you were looking toward the house, located some damage there, and in looking into that damage, it appeared to be another partial bullet and fragment there.
I've handed you a group of photo exhibits. If you could, take a look at those.